Good morning. How are y'all? Hello, neighbors. We have part two of Coffee and Dulce, and I have two guest speakers as well. On my left, which is highly unusual. Introduce yourself.
My name is Jeff Scott, Man About Town.
And on my right,
Crystal Robinson.
and we're going to talk about impeachment, especially because it's very timely, and this is a timely debate type show. We talked about the environment the last time and climate change. And this one we're going to talk about impeachment and why the process even started. So real quick, tell me why, and I'm talking to you, Crystal, why Nancy Pelosi began the process yesterday.
Well, impeachment is in our Constitution. It actually is listed in all the first three articles. And it first has to happen in the House. And so when, and it's not the first time that it's been trying, but she is just starting the inquiry and see if there is enough evidence to even get to the impeachment process, which is just a grand jury process to see if there is a need to have enough, if they have enough evidence for an actual trial. And so what practically it is we're in that process where the prosecutors, which is our jury judicial committee of the House, is just looking to see and getting all that information to see if we even need to start the process of impeachment. And then we'll go to the next level, which is a grand jury type situation.
Well, and I'm going to ask you real quick, Ed, what is your hot take as far as the timing is concerned? I mean, because we've had this discussion since almost Trump took office.
Even before.
Yeah, even probably before. But what is your take on specifically the timing of this?
I guess it's just the frustration has accumulated. We're in the early to mid stages of the Democratic primary. As we know, there are 6 senators, right, who would be presiding over. And Crystal, I have a quick question for you. When you talk about what you're calling the grand jury process, are you referring to the Senate? Because the Senate are the ones that vote on it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
you have all 3 branches get involved in both chambers. And so you have the impeachment process, and then you have the trial.
Right, but so that really happens under the guise of the Senate, right? So the timing could be the fact that, and I'm just speculating here based on journalist Michael Tracy. He makes a very good point that Elizabeth Warren, Harris, Sanders, Klobuchar, and I'm leaving out some people, Bennett. They would be involved in this, and so it may be an opportunity for Elizabeth Warren to show off her lawyerly skills and go full with all her prosecutorial force to go after this issue and perhaps build her up during the Democratic campaign. So, we because we know it's a political process, we have to think about what some of the underlying political motives are, and I think that's a very reasonable one to consider.
And also, too, one important part is we just went through this process about 20 years ago with President Clinton. And one of the interesting things was at the time, the Senate was controlled by the Democrats, and it was Senator Lieberman that actually chose not to impeach Clinton. And it was his own party, and there was a lot of reasons why. And in this situation, it's going to come down to probably Mitt Romney is most likely going to be the one that's going to decide whether it's going to pass to an impeachment they're going to finally make that decision if it comes down to it, if it does go forward to the Senate, which is an interesting parallel.
Yeah.
So you're going to have you have the House Democrats that have begun this, but it's ultimately going to reside with the Senate Republicans.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's kind of history repeating itself. On that note, Clinton came out of the impeachment process with a 73% approval rating.
Right.
So
that fact is not lost on Nancy Pelosi. I think we would agree with that, right? That one of the reasons that it's been delayed, at least up until now, Nancy Pelosi has said it's a waste of time, is because the Republicans dominate the Senate, and based on past historical experiences with Clinton in particular, the person came out almost stronger on the back end. So from the standpoint of a political strategist, she's saying up until now it would be a waste of time. So something might have changed.
So the next question is, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm going to ask you first, why now? Why now? Is it the Ukrainian thing?
I think it's got to that point that you have to do something. We have, they just have the transcripts now that just came out, and he actually did ask a foreign government to investigate our own citizen who is also running against him. And so it got to that point where we had, we had that whistleblower, we had the tapes. It was, Nixon all over again, that you just could not say, well, this is what he really meant. From all these other times, he's been able to, he's Teflon. He's like, okay, he says something and then we massage it and go, well, he can't just be that bad. I mean, he's just that. He's that crazy uncle, and that we just decided that we weren't ever accept that he's really bad. But when you actually have tapes, just like when you had Nixon, he had enough evidence. And one thing with Nixon is that he realized, hey, this impeachment process and the trial and what they're going to find is going to destroy our country more than if I just went off and flew back home. And so this is going to be a deciding factor on if there's enough evidence for him to get charged and be able to have the trial to see if he actually needs to be, taken out of office, because you can be impeached. We've had two presidents already. Andrew Johnson, which is actually from Raleigh, North Carolina. He was a Democratic president that was vice president of Lincoln, and they went through the whole process. And when they went to the trial, he was one vote less, and that helped figure out, was it a political thing? Was it he actually did something? I mean, he fired people. That's the same thing as what Nixon did and what Trump's doing.
So I'm going to stop you there. So the real question is impeachment primarily political, or is it primarily legal? I mean,
it
or
is,
can you separate it?
It is political, and I've been thinking about this a little bit because you do read different pundits talk about the fact that it's a political process. There's a high threshold, but it's very subjective. So I was trying to think of other things that are also sort of purely political, and I was trying to think of a local example that would allow people to kind of understand. And one of those things is zoning. There are no sort of hard and fast legal rules about zoning. People are kind of showing up and they're saying, I don't want this 7-Eleven to be built on my corner, and I don't want the Boys and Girls Club over here. I want it over there. So a lot of it has to do with just different motives that people have. Pure NIMBYism. I don't want this in my backyard, or I don't want this color of people moving into my neighborhood. So there's so that's sort of raw politics on the local level, when you get into discussions about what should be built where, how can it shouldn't be next to me, and you get into these tooth and nail fights, and it's just about people's preferences, you know. So so I view this political process in the House of Representatives and in the Senate as a political process, which is a lot like not in my backyard. So you know, I know that, you know, Christian has had terrible bouts of TDS over the last couple of years, and I've tried to help him through it as best as I could, you know, and I've tried to help a lot of other people get through this process, that finding out that, you know, Putin really wasn't the puppet master behind everything. And I think it's really an ailment that is animating people. So again, just going back to the motive of the political participants, I think that they believe that they're going to uncover something that is going to compromise them. And you know, if you read the Mueller report like I did, and even the Russian response, I actually read the Russian response, you'll find that Crystal said it. He's very much like Teflon, and I think well, let's go back to. We'll get back to the idea of strategizing or speculating about what the future might hold. But
the deal is that they did not begin the impeachment process right after the Mueller report. Mm-hmm. That in light of the Ukrainian evidence and this Biden-Ukrainian mm-hmm. controversy, mm-hmm. we have now entered into a different era of impeachment for Trump. So having said that, you know, why is the Ukrainian thing that much different than, say, the Russian thing? Because the Russian thing didn't hold much water, and I'm going to ask you, why base it on the Ukrainian thing?
If the Russian thing happened, it was before he became president. Okay. And this Ukrainian incident was while he was president. He did extra things. He didn't just ask, hey, can you go investigate Biden? He's withheld money. They've actually also found that $140 million have gone to the Ukraine government, and our Treasury Secretary made a statement saying, we don't know how that happened. We don't know. There was no, you know, there's no budgeting for it. It was some little check got sent over there before this conversation. And then, so there are some other things around there that is making people on both sides of the aisle question that, is this an individual that we want to be in as our president? And the impeachment process is not if it's something actually illegal. It's a term of art that was taken from the English and brought over here, and they put that down. And so you can read the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. You can read all the history of why did we put those statements on there. And it could be, you know, what, like Andrew Johnson, one of the 5 things that they put down is that he made 3 statements that was mean to someone else. I mean, we have 3,000 a day that, you know, Trump says mean. So, I mean, that we've changed what our, you know, what our standards are, but we're getting to that point where we're saying on both sides, you know, you have longtime Republicans saying, this is really not my president. And I would like it to change back to when we were actually talking about political things. Policy, that is political. And he actually did things that were against our policies already.
Well, and the parallel between Clinton and Trump, some of the things were accusations of Chinese tampering with the election process. There was Chinese general scandal as far as bribes. There was multiple charges besides the the sex scandal that
Right.
became the most famous, and it
Right.
actually ended up being the only thing that really hung him was that he lied under oath
Yeah.
and lost his law license. But the parallel is the same leading up to Clinton's election and leading up to Trump's election. There has been controversy with both presidents and really led to the impeachment charges, at least on the Clinton side of it. I think there was over a dozen or 2 dozen charges and only one stuck. But having said that, should things that before Trump became president, should that be included in the process as far as the impeachment? I mean,
I'm not quite sure I understand. Are
the
you talking about-
Russian scandal,
Yeah.
the Stormy Daniels thing, and
Well,
and
all of those cases are investigatable on their own.
Right.
Like in the case of Stormy Daniels, Stormy, toasting to you. You know, we have precedent in this state with John Edwards, right? So John Edwards paid somebody off through a campaign donor, and he didn't get it didn't affect him, right? And the reason he didn't have to pay a fine or anything is because that was just in the normal course of business. That's something you would have done to protect your family, independent of your political reputation. So I think Trump is on solid legal ground when he says that's something I would have done to protect myself from Melania or to protect my reputation as a whatever he thinks his reputation is. The same FEC rules would apply. So the I believe the John Edwards case in this is what's the word I'm looking for? Is the right precedent to deal with those kinds of campaign contributions to pay off a mistress or a porn star or whatever. So having said that, are we really going to go through all of these things that in many cases have already been investigated up the wazoo, including alleged relations with Russia, alleged, some of the other allegations against him? Are we really going to go through all of those? Because when I look at all the Russian, and I follow this very closely right from the beginning, are we going to look at this Russian spy Butina case? There's a lot more information coming around about that these days. This poor woman sitting in jail for no reason. So what are we going to, are we going to reinvestigate a lot of these claims that we've already paid $40 million to investigate? I mean, Nadler is sitting there thinking, we're going to find something in here, right? And I have to say that the party is pretty much divided on this. I mean, I've got some very good close friends who think, yeah, impeachment.
And then clarify Libertarian Party, just for
That's
people
right.
that are just tuning in.
So let me just take a minute, and I'll Bill Weld, who endorsed me in 2018 because he was a Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate in 2016. I sought his endorsement, and I got his endorsement. Now he's running in a primary against Trump, and along with Mark Sanford and Walsh. He came out and used the H word, hanging. This is a hanging offense. I mean, treason is subject to the death penalty.
Right.
Okay, so I don't agree with that. I mean, so I'm not in Weld's camp, but there are people on Libertarian Party, former candidates, who say, yeah, that's the way we're going on this. And there's also Justin Amash in the House, who went from being a Republican to being an independent, and he was the one that came out for impeachment proceedings. So he is the most prominent libertarian-leaning congressman who is leaning toward impeachment based on basically the second half of the Mueller report, saying it's all here, his abuses of laws, they're just so rampant. So I understand the case that we're the straw that broke the camel's back, right?
Right.
But whenever I dig in deeply to these things, I'm looking for something closer to, something probative, something that really means something that is really a smoking gun, and not all of this other stuff. Okay, so I view this as the, sort of a there's a name for this fallacy. I think it's the Gish Gallop or something, where you're just throwing 20 things out, right? And none of them really add up. None of them really hang together, and they're all about innuendo, but they don't add up to enough to prosecute somebody.
But as we've seen with Bill Clinton, with Hillary Clinton, they did investigation after investigation with Hillary, with the emails and the Whitewater and
the commodity trading.
They came. I mean, they've sat through enough trials to make up for 5 presidents. Having said that, it looks like we're going to be in this for the long haul. I mean, whether Trump gets elected or not, reelected next year. Having said that, should we have waited till 2021 to do this and see if Trump got reelected or if he lost the deal and then change the tone of this? Should we have waited till 2021? Why risk bringing this into 2020?
I wanted to talk about some of the other
Yeah,
things.
sure.
Anyway, I want to do the other question.
Got to give her an opportunity to
First,
respond.
I don't think that we need to throw the kitchen sink. I think that learn from other impeachment processes that Andrew Johnson, they gave 5. They said, hey, here's your 5. Nixon, here's your 3. Even Clinton was only, hey, you gave money, you lied, you gave a gift, you lied. There was only like 7 things, and it was all based on 2 situations. So I don't think that, our politicians are still people. They have to listen to all of this. And if you have a jury and you're saying that this person did 35 things, they're not going to say, oh, well, they gave me 35 things, so I'll say that they're guilty on 1 thing. Because if I don't understand all 34, I'll just say 1 thing. It doesn't happen that way. It gets to the point where they're saying, okay, if the prosecutor says that he's done all of this, I'm not going to sift through to see which one he actually met all the criteria. I'm just going to go away, and I get to go to lunch early and say that all of us he's not guilty, let's go. And I think that if we focus on this Ukrainian thing and, maybe something else that we come up with, I don't think that we're going to do the Russian thing, because that was before he came in. And I know that, there are people on the left side that wants to, see him go down for every little thing, and it's not going to happen. So we need to narrow our scope and figure out what is met with all the criteria, and figure out what to charge them with. Because I do think that this thing has gotten to the point where we just don't want to have that happen in our future. And some of this thing will actually maybe solidify in an act that the next president can say, well, I can do this and this and this, but I can't do this. And that's one thing with Nixon and Andrew Johnson, is that they fired people. And through the Andrew Johnson situation, another case was went up to the Supreme Court, and they solidified what can the president do in firing cabinet members and hiring cabinet members on during the time that we don't have a Congress in session. Can they put a cabinet member in? And just like with Nixon. And so that was something they didn't know. So they did the impeachment process. They gave 5 different things. Then through that process, we figured out, is that something that the president can do or not? What we can do with this one is say, what can a president do when he's negotiating with a foreign government? Because in Trump's mind, he took over the United States. That was his words, is that he has now taken over control of the United States like he's the CEO. And as a president, you're not the CEO. You are a manager of sub-departments. And the CEO is the voter. So we have, we put that person in, and he has departments, which is fairly new in the United States. We had a cabinet, and then the cabinet would have one or two people under them, and then we started adding all these departments. And we know that he can't go and call up and say, this person, this mailman cut me off today, I'm going to fire the mailman. He can fire the postmaster. He can call the postmaster up and say, I don't like Bob. But he can't just go fire someone like a CEO could. And so through Nixon's actions on Bloody Sunday, we figured out that Congress had to make a rule and figure out, what can a president do with that? And so with this thing, we can go in and say, at this point, most of America, is what we can see at this time, being that the Senate, all 100 of them, said, hey, we need to get the transcript from the whistleblower. They didn't have to do that. They could have played all that politics of Republicans want to protect him. At this time, they're saying, no, let's just lay all of our cards on the table and see if he did do something that we need to figure out if he's okay to do. And if the impeachment process is just to see if we as a country doesn't like it. And then once we figure out that we think that this is a crime of high misdemeanors and all of that jazz, and it can just be that we just don't like what words is coming out of his mouth. That's Federalist Papers number 65, is just that it is a political thing. It can just be that we just don't like what that politician's saying. And so then they decide that, yes, we're going to impeach. Then we have to have the trial. He's a president during that whole time. Just because the Senate says, the House said, hey, I think we need to impeach. They take the file, they hand it over to the Senate. The Senate says, let's have the impeachment hearing. It's not a trial, it's a hearing. And then they all vote and say, yes, we're going to impeach him. Then we have the trial, and the trial says, nope, he's not guilty of these.
So
he can still be president.
So we could still have all this stuff come to light and not really have much of a process. They could look at it and just say, there isn't nothing to do. Like he did his job. Like he's right. Within the confines of his law, of the laws. His what he's supposed to do as the president of the United States. That he can fire who he wants. He can do that because a lot of his cabinet members, to be fair, he may have forced them out, but a lot of them have resigned. I mean, and he hasn't fired every single one of them. Now, somebody like Rex Tillerson, that when he was leaving the office, said, Trump's an idiot, and wasn't real happy about it. But he may be. How would they be able to, for future presidents? How would you be able to censure just bad behavior? I mean, because all of our presidents have had some type of history of bad behavior or because they are extreme personalities.
Yeah, him firing his cabinet, he could walk in and fire the whole darn thing tomorrow. He might be doing it right now by a tweet, we don't know. But he has the right to do that.
Right.
We figured that out after Nixon, that it's like you can do that. That's the only people he can hire. And so everybody else, he has to go through the process of being an employee, and so going back to, if we do something like Kucinich did with Bush, and he just threw out 35 things, it never went through anything. I mean, there was the only president.
You're talking about Dennis Kucinich?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
Dennis Kucinich. He did impeachment process for Bush number 2, and it was 35 different things. And I mean, it was from, hey, yes, we have the Patriot Act issues, we have going to war in Iraq and Afghanistan without approval, to, you know, he eats his bagel with butter instead of cream cheese. You know, it was like a long listing of
Right.
stuff. It never went anywhere. If he would have focused it, maybe he could have done something. The only president that hasn't received a impeachment inquiry since 1980 was Obama. Reagan we've had 30, I think it's 30, impeachment inquiries since 1980. And so it's not something that's abnormal. We have these things, they go and look at it, then we go to the next level. And I think as United States as a whole, we are better when we know what our people did. You know, you had the Warren Commission, they went out, they looked at Watergate, and everyone looked at it and was like, oh yeah, he did this, this, and this. He left, we know what he did.
That wasn't the Warren Commission.
No, the Watergate,
The
Watergate, yeah,
Watergate.
yeah. Warren was the
my,
Kennedy
my
shooting.
brain,
Yeah.
my brain was just going like
Sorry,
that.
thank you for
We
fixing
have
me.
too many W's going
Yeah.
on here.
Yeah.
But, you know, they did have the investigation. Even though that Nixon resigned, they went and investigated. And they decided, as the American public, we were like, okay, yes, he did this. He went away and we could heal. And with Clinton,
I think you're thinking of the church commissions, which followed the Watergate hearings, right?
Right.
Because that looked into the role of the intelligence agencies.
yes, wrong justice. Because one thing is after we get to this here, after when the trial is going to be with the Supreme Court Justice. The Supreme Court Justice is Judge Roberts, which is Republican leaning. So he's got a Senate that's Republican leaning, a Supreme Court Justice that's Republican leaning. Hopefully we can give to the federal, the people, everything that they can feel that if it does not remove him, that we don't have all those people that say, well, the system's rigged. He's really guilty, but if we didn't have Judge Roberts there saying that he wasn't, you know, but to have everything out there, and so that people can say, this was a fair trial.
But in 2019, does this make sense to what we're doing? And I'm fairly clear on why you oppose this, but does this even make sense to do this? Is this something that we should even be doing? I mean, because we're gonna spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
We're gonna spend a lot of time looking away from the presidential campaign and focusing on this for the next however long this process takes. Does this make sense? Is this good governance?
Look. If it gets launched in earnest, and steps are taken, and the inquiry begins, and it looks like it's being sensible, then certainly I'll be on board with it, right? Like right now, I think that Nancy Pelosi 2 days ago was correct by saying, you know, we shouldn't do this. It's a waste of time. It's only going to strengthen Trump. I still believe that. I believe that this will actually strengthen him, and I don't want to see him made stronger. I don't want to see his base rally around him. Okay. Now, again, having said that, my party and my instincts are somewhat divided. The thing that bothers me the most, and I've been talking about this right from the beginning, is that the fact that he's not getting attacked from the left, from the freedom fighters, from the people who want to see justice in what we're doing around the world. He's being attacked from the right by the people on the left, by the liberals, by the alleged opposition party. So I do not like the newly this long romance that the Democrats have had with the deep state, the military-industrial complex, the big military spenders. I think that's a terrible, terrible relationship. So the fact that he's getting attacked from the right, and I know we've had these discussions about this, you know that is a big red flag. Big red flag. If we had a Dennis Kucinich in office and he could pin this down to 5 things about what Trump was doing, whether Trump was, willy-nilly bombing Syria, going into embargoing, sanctioning, freezing the funds of Venezuela. If we could pin those down and attack him from the left and say a president doesn't have the right to be the world's policeman and dictator, and that we've got to roll this back, and these are the crimes you're committing by holding Julian Assange subject to U.S. extradition with no charges, holding Chelsea Manning in jail at $1,000 a day. If the Democrats were attacking him on that, I would say I am all in, but they're not.
So when somebody says something like they recently said about hanging him, to me that's like a dog whistle thing. I mean that doesn't seem like good governance to me when you're saying hang a president, hang a sitting president.
Again, that's a matter of communications and messaging and strategizing. I don't approve of that. Maybe one day when I'm a more sophisticated politician, I will be adopting the same types of mannerisms. But in the meantime, I don't think, look, Weld was an experienced governor. He was a congressman. He knows how to raise money. He knows how to enrage his base. He knows what he's doing. I disagree with him on this topic. Happy to have had his endorsement. Won't be endorsing him because I have nothing to say about the Republican primary. I don't like his language. I got good, close friends who love his language, but I disagree with that. I would never say that unless he came out for. He could do some things that would literally endanger the world, that would bring us closer to nuclear disaster. He's pulled out of the INF treaty. He's moving missile systems, defense systems onto Russia's border. This whole Ukraine scandal, I believe, is gonna actually not gonna go anywhere, because I don't think we should be giving aid to the Ukraine. They are right on Russia's border. I think we should respect the Bush 1 borders that were negotiated in earnest back in the early 90s and say, we are not going to push NATO up to your borders. We are going to let Russia have its historical buffer in Europe and not invade that space.
Well, we're going a little far off topic there.
Okay.
I'm
just saying the conditions under which I would support an inquiry and an impeachment and maybe even a hanging if he's
legit faults of his and legit mistakes that could be deemed as war crimes and or violations of office or that sort of thing is $140 million of mystery money to Ukraine. Is that treason? Would you consider that treason? If it's indeed tracked to Trump, directly to him, would you consider that treason?
If it is to gain one thing is, I don't think it was given to them for the gain of American people.
Okay.
And so if it was personal gain, yes, it's against the it's against the people. And it's to get him into office again, because he does not want to get out of office. He's seen what's happened to Israeli
Netanyahu.
Yes. Puerto Rico's governor. I mean, all of these different people that these governments were, you know, Boris from UK.
Boris Johnson.
Yes, they were starting to move right, and then the people started fighting back. And I think that he realizes the minute that he's out, everything, the money that was given to Stormy, all of that stuff that is not part of being the president that should be looked at, okay? That stuff is just out there.
So I'll stop you there. So you're saying he's trying to stay in office so he doesn't get prosecuted.
Right.
And why is that? Why is I mean
New York is
clarify why he would do that. Can he be prosecuted for a criminal offense while he's president?
No, he can't be indicted.
No.
Okay.
He is free right now.
Okay.
And so the only thing he can do is be kicked out by the impeachment process and the trial process. Once they figure out that he has done something of those high crimes and misdemeanors that we have in our Constitution, then he's a normal citizen again. And the state of New York is compiling all sorts of stuff about his behavior outside of being president. And then he can be charged with all of those. So right now, he is a free person. And I think that the minute that he is not president, they're going to start charging him for things that he has done previous. And that's one reason he doesn't want his taxes to be shown, is that there's probably some things that they can pinpoint that they are investigating right now that they can't figure out what happened.
So the longer he's in office, the more that goes away. I mean, or at least he can stall it to the inevitable 2024. I'll reverse the logic. Okay, he gets impeached, gets removed from office. We now have President Pence. President Pence wins in 2020. You now have a sitting president that could pardon former President Trump, just like Ford did with Nixon and Agnew. What then?
Is he going to run again, or what? I
mean,
if Pence wants to do that and have it on his record to do that, then he has that on that record. I mean, Pence is going to be there. Hopefully he did some sort of tax issue and we can get him out. But then we just keep going down the line and they're not good either.
Right.
So
President Pence will establish a new department, the Department of Conversion Therapy.
Yes. Well, and this, there is some logic there. I mean, I can see. I personally don't buy into it, but I could see where somebody could say, I don't want Trump removed because the one waiting in line is actually worse than him.
I agree with that.
And it may not be number one. He's scary. He may be driving the policy behind Trump. So that there is that downfall that we could get. We could do worse.
I believe if you look at both of them closely, I believe that Pump. I believe that Pence is objectively worse than Trump.
Right.
And that's something similar to Bush and Cheney. But
yeah, that's
I think that we got to that level that if Trump would just shut the hell up and not say crazy things on his Twitter, where our stock market goes down 800 and then it shoots back up for 200. He just said that we're going to get out of the postal union. That means that we cannot, how are we going to send stuff out? Because right now we have the whole world, the UN, saying we want mail to every place. And he decided that, okay, we spend too much money as Americans to send postal stuff out. And we pay more in that program than China. Okay, let's negotiate again, but you don't just say, I don't like it, so I'm going to take my cookies and go home. Because that's all he keeps doing is saying we're going to pull out. Another thing with that is that gets me scared that he keeps taking away more rights, and if he decides that we don't get to mail out stuff, the only other thing is technology. How are we going to get the wall around?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, going back to Germany, use their postal service against their people. And I think he is smart. I mean, he's crafty smart. He's not like intelligent smart. He knows that if he can restrict access from the information for the normal people, he can control the what is going to be sent out to the world and to us. And yes, we will still have our postal service inside the United States, but then again, that means that everything that is inside the United States, he can open it up, he can read it, he can seal it back on with his little stamp, and if that gets to that level.
So we literally could be basically a bigger version of North Korea, where if he's unilaterally able to take away powers or implode our economy, for example, like he did with the soybean farmers and the China tariff controversy, is he slowly pulling anything that's going outward back inward economically? And then we're also seeing this with civil rights, with the LGBT, that sort of thing, is where we're slowly isolating ourselves. And it looks like he's making moves. Is there an argument to say, if we hang him on something, so to speak, I mean, theoretically, not physically, can we avoid becoming a isolated republic?
So I believe the whole question of whether you support his policies or not,
right,
is a whole other hour.
Right.
At least a whole other hour. The question before us today is really about impeachment, right? So the fact that I would never vote for Trump, I would never support Trump, I'm in a party that is antithetical to everything that he stands for, means that I don't support any of his policies.
Right.
And the few that I do support, we talked about on Coffee Pen Dulce, we talked about overtures to North Korea, talked about being somewhat restrained in Iran up to a certain point. The fact that he fired Bolton a couple weeks ago, I can take a little, yes, Bolton's out.
Right.
But it could be, Bolton squared, who replaces him. So I'm sort of done with talking about, he could be, because the country's already essentially a surveillance state. It's a national security state. We're already this close before a big part of the population wakes up to the fact that we're becoming a lot more totalitarian than we were. And so I'm deeply disturbed by all those trends, which is why I have been running for office, talking about these issues, talking about the rights of publishers to publish information about crimes of the state. So I believe that Trump, whether you want to call him the Cheeto Benito, the Mussolini in waiting, a man always looking for a balcony to get out there, and Twitter, I guess, is his balcony, right?
But could you say that it would make sense, though, to use this impeachment process as a targeted strike to take somebody like him out?
Not if it strengthens the war Democrats. Though I believe that the war Democrats are slightly marginally worse than Trump. I believe that they've completely abandoned their base. They've ostracized the anti-war people, and that's why the Greens and the Libertarians need to pick up the slack and read them the Riot Act.
So why aren't the Greens and the Libertarians change the Democratic Party, since we have to have
We've been kicked
270
out. We've been kicked
we
out.
have to have 270 electoral votes to get the next person in. I'm afraid that the 2020 Trump's going to get the 500 and something, just like Nixon.
Yeah, I believe so.
But
I believe
think
he's
that
going to win in a
we have
landslide.
both parties, both major parties, are having a wake-up call. What are we going to do? Because I will tell you, the reason why we're not doing, the Democrats are not talking about, Manning and
Assange.
yes, I cannot say his name,
And Edward Snowden and John Kirk.
is because that all happened under Obama. And so you stick some, he's sort of like the anti-democratic Democrats of Bernie. They've got their Jewish carpenter that he cannot do anything wrong, he can walk on water. And we had Obama and the middle, Democrats think that he can't walk on water either.
That he
can walk on water. And so
that damn Hawaiian.
Yeah, he can
He
surf.
wasn't born here though.
He's Hawaiian.
He can surf, and so he supposedly can, And they're not going to question him. And that I think that hopefully that the individuals who will start questioning what the Democrats need to do in the future, fight for climate control, fight for getting rid of all the stuff that we got through the Patriot Act, that kind of stuff. That could be the Libertarians coming in. That could be the Green Party coming in and saying, okay, I would rather, you have to be a two-party person right now, instead of just having, because we can't get enough votes without the 270. And going in and saying, I'm going to change it, because the Democrats have changed throughout the the centuries. Republicans changed, the Whigs,
We have run out of time. I'm having to call it. So I'm
Sorry.
going to give y'all both about 60 seconds to do your closing comments. I'm going to start with you, Jeff.
Well, I'm looking forward to all the lovely political theater that's ahead of us in the next several months. I don't know. I have no idea where this is going to go. It is an important election year. 2020 is important because of the census and the redrawing. So it seems like an interminable election season, and especially for me, having coming off 2018 and 2019. So I'm just not getting any rest here. I need to just chill and zone out. And so the idea of impeachment hearings to me is really just exhausting, because not only is this conversation happening here, but it's going to be the talk of the town too. And it's like, I think there are other issues. I'm getting closer involved with Normal. I want to get closer, have closer involvement with this, the pain management community, because they're suffering under the DEA and their new restrictions and their expansionism. I'm getting involved in some state politics to see what's going on with
And
the
that is a
educational
different
system.
show.
And that is a different show. I don't want to even deal with it.
I would give Crystal 60 seconds, and then we're going to wrap up.
Thank you.
My take is that we always need to be transparent, and that every time that we are able to investigate, and that all sides can see, and then come up, like with the Mueller report. It was 400 and some odd pages. Go out and read it. Make your own decision about it. And that's what this is it's an impeachment process, just like if you had a cop killing someone. They need to go through the grand jury instead of just the DA saying, no, we're not even going to charge them. So that's where we're at, is just that we're going to go through the grand jury, see if there's enough evidence to actually charge him with whatever charges they come up with to go into a trial. And that's why I'm for the impeachment process.
Well, true patriotism is not going along with everything that our president says. And quite frankly, I don't know whether I'm for this process or not, but it is happening, and impeachment is a reality. And for the American people, they're going to get to sit back and watch the process, and that is part of democracy, unfortunately. And
Drink up,
fortunately.
Shriners.
So we definitely have a long political season ahead of us. Thank you for watching, and
Thank
good
you,
night.
Crystal. Thank you so much for volunteering.